welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be talking about editorial illustration. Since I have started sharing my life as an illustrator online, I've been getting a lot of questions about how to become an illustrator, how to become freelance, how to be an artist, and to be honest, I find those kind of questions a little bit overwhelming just because it took a lot of different things to get to the stage I am now, and it's kind of hard to know where to begin on explaining all of that. So I thought a way to overcome that would be to break it down into different areas of illustration. I thought I would start with editorial illustration because it's an area that I'm really familiar with. It's a very popular area within illustration for artists to get hired, and I would say about half of the work that I do as an illustrator is to do with editorial illustration. Now, editorial illustration means artwork for newspapers or magazines. Over the years, I've been lucky enough to work with some really amazing clients, including Wall Street Journal, Esquire magazine, Economist magazine, Stylist magazine, Metro newspaper, the BBC Wildlife magazine, Pets at Home, and Darling magazine, among quite a few others. So to start, I'm going to go back to the beginning of my career as an illustrator. One of my first few jobs was actually in editorial illustration. I can't remember which one came first, but I know in 2012 I did an illustration for Intelligent Life magazine, which are no longer in print, I don't think. They were owned by The Economist. So I did a food illustration for them, and I actually ended up working with them for a couple of years. So it was a really good introduction into editorial illustration, and the art director was really nice. I got to know him quite well, and I feel like he really supports new and up-and-coming illustrators. So I was really glad to work with him for a couple of years and kind of learn about the industry that way. I also worked for the Florida Times, which is obviously a newspaper based in Florida. So I never got to see the image in print, but I painted a portrait of Elvis Costello. So that was really fun. And it was also really exciting for me to get my first overseas client. After I graduated, I went into full-time work, obviously, to pay my bills and rent and that sort of thing. But in my spare time, I was doing a lot of illustrating, producing a lot of artwork and blogging about it as well. And I think that's probably how my first few clients found me. I really wanted to get into food illustration, so I commissioned myself and did a load of breakfast food illustrations, and I blogged about them and I added them to some different portfolio sites, and I think they got a bit of traction and really helped for my work to become more noticed. I also contacted art directors and magazines and publications, as everyone does, and I think I sent out a few postcards and things as well. It's hard to know whether that method actually works or not, just because art directors are inundated with portfolios and postcards at all times, so it's very easy for yours to get lost in the pile. So I'm sure that happened 95% of the time when I was contacting people in the early days. Next up, I'm going to talk about what an editorial job actually looks like. It's usually a very fast turnaround job, just because magazines and newspapers go to print very quickly, and they're looking for illustrators that can commit straight away and produce the work quickly. So the turnaround can be anything from within a couple of days or as much as 2 weeks, I would say. Sometimes a little bit longer than that if they're planning months in advance, but obviously that depends on the type of publication, because if they are producing weekly newspapers or something like that, they're going to want artists who can commit really quickly. You're usually contacted by the client. They will give you a brief explanation of what the job will entail, just so you can get a feel for what it will be, and they'll give you an idea of a deadline that they have in mind, and also they might discuss the fee. I'm going to talk about pricing later on in this video, but I found with editorial jobs they're normally quite upfront with what they want to pay you, and I think that can be just to save time, and also because they might have fixed rates within their company. After you have accepted the job and maybe made some tweaks to the deadline or the price, they will then send you the full brief. Briefs can look completely different depending on the type of work they want. For me, I'd say I'm usually hired for my style rather than my ideas. So usually the brief is pretty rigid and straightforward. They usually want me to paint a portrait or a couple of portraits or an object or a food dish or something like that, and what they're hiring me for is my style. But that can be different. You can get a really open-ended brief if you are a different kind of artist or if they're a different kind of publication, so it really depends. The next stage is to send sketches. My sketches are mostly just in pencil. I don't usually work in paint at this stage unless the client particularly requests it. Things they're looking for at this stage are the layout and just to make sure you've got the likeness of a portrait, for example. Once you've sent the sketches over, they will approve those, or they will give you some edits so you can go away and make the changes and then resend the sketches. And then you are free to start the final illustration. It's always best to make sure you iron out any issues or any questions at the sketches stage. At least that's really important to me, because once I've started painting in watercolour, it's a very time-consuming process and I don't really want to have to make changes then. Once you finish the final piece, you'll usually have to send that over to the client as a digital file. I don't think I've ever sent original artwork for editorial illustration. So I will scan the image at 300 dpi at least, and then I'll save the file as a CMYK file ready for printing, and also usually a TIFF. So that means that any layers are included and you can send the image without a background. So it's much easier for the client to then place that within their layout on a page. In regards to changes or adjustments that the client then needs, I include one set of changes within my prices, and those are usually small scale changes to the image that I can usually do digitally, so I don't have to do any more painting. I've just realised that I forgot to mention contracts, which is a very important stage, but as I said, with editorial it's usually a really fast project, so contracts can be something that you forget. Definitely done that a few times, and then I've had to request a contract, but it's a good thing to remember to ask for a contract and make sure you signed it before the work gets started. Usually the client will just send one over once you've accepted the commission. So now I'm going to talk about pricing, which is a little bit of an awkward thing to discuss. I don't see many illustrators talking about pricing openly online, and I'm definitely more that way inclined as well. It can be hard to talk about pricing openly because it depends on so many different things. That's why whenever anyone asks about pricing with me, I usually direct them to the AOI, who are the Association of Illustrators, and they have a pricing survey for members which outlines suggestions on how much to charge for different areas of illustration. I definitely recommend becoming a member of the AOI. They're there to help you, and if you have any questions you can just email or call them, and yeah, any part of your illustration business that you're struggling with, they'll definitely be there to help you, and they're especially good for pricing advice, like I said. But I'm going to briefly touch on how much I charge, just so you can get a rough idea. It varies a lot, but I had a look at some of my recent editorial commissions. I tend to charge anywhere between £100 to £800, £900, something like that, for editorial illustration, and that doesn't include cover designs because they are usually a lot more than that, because it's a very important image, it's what's going to sell the magazine. So my pricing depends on a lot of different things. It depends on the size of the magazine or the newspaper. So if they are a publication that I'm not familiar with, I will ask for a rough idea of their print run and also their distribution. So obviously for massive publications you would charge a higher fee because they're going to be printing your work more times and more people are going to see it. I also price according to the size of the artwork. Editorial illustration is normally either spot sized, so that would be smaller than quarter of the page, quarter page illustrations, half page and full page. You also might be doing a number of different spreads throughout the magazine. So the larger the artwork on the page, the higher your fee would be. So to give you a little example, for a spot size illustration, my fees are usually anywhere between £80 to £150 depending on the size of the publication, and for a half page illustration it'll be anywhere between £400 to about £800, something like that, depending on lots of different things, depending on how detailed the illustration needs to be, how long it will take me, and yeah, the size of the publication again. These numbers that I'm throwing out at you are just a very rough guideline. I definitely seek further advice on this. This is just my advice, so I'm just one illustrator, but I think it's really important to make sure you're not undercharging for your work, because that really damages the whole of the illustration industry if you do that as well. Pricing is really important. Just make sure you ask all the relevant questions to the client and you gather all the information you need before you send them a price if they don't already have one. So, my top tips for editorial illustration. The number one piece of advice for new illustrators would be to do the work that you want to be hired for. It's definitely the most useful thing I did when I was just starting out. I didn't have much food illustration in my portfolio when I graduated uni, so I made sure that I produced some. My next tip is in regards to art directors. By all means contact them, but definitely don't expect a response. They're very, very busy, and they're also inundated with emails and letters and that sort of thing from artists and illustrators, so they're probably not going to respond to you. If they do, then that's really great. Even if they don't, they might have just taken your portfolio and put it on file for any future projects, so don't be disheartened by that. My next tip is to be professional and reliable. Like I said, editorial illustration is usually pretty fast, so they're looking for illustrators that they can really rely on to do the work quickly and to stick to the deadlines. If for any reason you've had a bit of a disaster and you're not going to be able to meet their deadline, definitely communicate that with them, and they'll usually have a couple of days extra that they can give you. The worst thing you can do is not communicate with them and then just miss the deadline, because that really messes around with people's time frames, and it makes you look a bit unprofessional. It also can be important to know what art directors expect from illustrators, and that can be something that's really hard to know about, because if you've never worked with them, how would you know? So a really good site that I recommend browsing through is, I think it's actually a Tumblr blog. It's called Dear Art Director, and it's written anonymously by art directors, and they're answering questions submitted by illustrators and artists, and it's just really honest and frank, and you can really get a sense of what an art director expects from you. Make sure you know about the current illustration market. Make sure you are reading publications, you are reading blogs, you know about trends, you are immersed in the illustration world, you know what's popular at the moment and that sort of thing, just so you can get an idea of where you might fit into all of that. And also in the front they usually have a list of the contributors, so you'll find the name of the art director or the creative director in the front, and I can't guarantee that there will be an email address or a contact number or anything, but definitely jot down their name and see if you can find any more out about them online. Maybe you can find their LinkedIn profile or something, and there'll be an email address there, whilst doing a little bit of detective work. And my last tip would be to educate yourself on pricing. It's definitely worth doing a bit more research and making sure that you don't undercharge for your work. I'm going to recommend 3 books that I have on the business side of illustration, and I definitely recommend picking them up because they talk about pricing a lot more. So that is everything. I really hope you've enjoyed this video and it's kind of helped you a little bit. If you have any further questions, of course leave them in the comments and I'll try and answer. Please do share this video if you have any friends who are looking to get into illustration. Subscribe if you're new as well. I make weekly vlog videos, and I'm also trying to make more videos like this with advice, and I do a few lifestyle kind of videos as well, so definitely subscribe if you're new, and I'll leave links to my social media in the description as well, and I'll see you again very soon for a new video. Bye!